Is there a way to restore the budget and the reconciliation process? There used to be what was called sort of the Conrad rule, that reconciliation would be used for deficit reduction rather than deficit increases, and that of course has gone away. And I don't, what are your thoughts, Molly? Can we ever return to the use of reconciliation to actually reduce the deficit rather than increase the deficit?
Yeah, so I think when I think about reconciliation and I think back to sort of its history, I think it's important to note that it's always been used as a way to, even when it was used to enact bipartisan deficit reduction, it was there were still things that would happen in reconciliation bills that were important to the majority party. So in the Senate. So even over time, as it's sort of taken on this character of kind of the one neat trick that a majority has under unified party control to move something without the threat of a filibuster, even going further back in the history, it has been this important tool in the toolbox of the Senate majority party. What has happened over time, though, is that as it's become seen as the primary way to achieve party-defining policy change in periods of unified party control, because of how polarized the parties are and how hard it is for either party to get some members of the other party to agree to the things that are really important in its platform. A couple things have happened. One is that sort of this nature of reconciliation encourages boundary pushing. So we know that the reconciliation process is not unlimited. We have the Byrd rule, we have other rules, other aspects of the Congressional Budget Act that limit what can be done using the reconciliation process. But as it's become more and more responsible for things that are important to majority parties, it has encouraged, folks have tried to push the boundaries of what can kind of get put into that box. We've seen both under Republicans in 2017, under Democrats in 2021, calls for a party majority to, for example, disregard the advice of the Senate's parliamentarian on what is and is not permissible under the Byrd rule. I think that really typifies this dynamic, this boundary pushing. It also, because there are limits on the process, it affects the legislative negotiating space in a way that is less true in some other regular order legislative processes. You can't negotiate over everything in the context of a reconciliation bill because there are restrictions on what can be included. The other thing, and since you brought up, Steve, the shift to deficit increasing bills away from deficit reduction bills, is that's also it's also changed the trade-off environment. So when the legislative tool was largely used to reduce the deficit, there's this sort of notion that everyone had to share in some of the pain. So you'd see these reconciliation bills that named lots of committees in the reconciliation instructions. Lots of committees were contributing something towards this shared goal of deficit reduction. We just kind of spread that pain around. Now, as we've shifted to using the tool for deficit increasing legislation, we'll end up with sort of the cap, by how much can this increase the deficit. And then there are much more, I think, challenging fights across committees, across policy priorities, about whose priorities are going to fit in under that cap. So it's creating different trade-offs in a way than where, as before, there was this mechanism to sort of share and spread the pain around.